Wow, good afternoon everybody. I didn't expect so many happy smiley faces on a nice afternoon in San Francisco before the rain starts. So for those who don't know me, my name's Rob Stroud. I work for Forrester. I have a very strange New York accent. For those who don't know, it does come from the 51st state, Australia. When I'm in Australia, I say that the US is the 8th state of Australia, but that's okay. I do live in New York, so don't let anything I say surprise you too much. They told me when they gave me this session that I had about 4 hours, and now they told me I've got 26 more minutes. So we'll have to go relatively quickly through this. But if you have any questions, my email address, my Twitter handle are freely available. Just send me a note, and I'm happy to share with you. So I took over DevOps at Forrester about 18 months ago, and I took it over from a great person called Amy DiMartine, and she's doing security now, and she's looking at how DevSecOps applies to security and how we do secure coding and secure development and deployment. And one of the things I looked at straight away is what are people asking us about? So we pulled our inquiry list from a couple of analysts and we got 700 inquiries last year on DevOps. I can already share with you the number this year is going to be about double. So we've seen almost 100% increase in DevOps this year. And the questions are fundamentally changing. Last year, the biggest question I got is, what is DevOps? And how do I use it? And what do I do with it? And how do I deploy it? And it's really an interesting conversation because the industries it was coming from, and you can see my industries in here as well, and I know you can all get the slides so you can have a look. The industries varied, and it was quite interesting. Everything except government was calling me. There were just about no government inquiries. And that's a bit of a shock, right, to some of you? Maybe some of you it's not. But it's kind of interesting in terms of what we're seeing, that DevOps has, in what we call now, reached escape velocity. And I'll give you some data in a moment that proves that, or at least it proves it from a statistical perspective. And anybody following me on Twitter will know I'm having a Twitter war with somebody over data at the moment. Is data relevant? And I just came down from talking to Nicole Forrester upstairs because she has the same challenges. But we think that the reason why DevOps has fundamentally hit escape velocity is because DevOps is a way that you actually help the business execute on business transformation or digital transformation, whatever you want to call it. And we had a great discussion at lunchtime about should we even be saying transformation because transformation's imposed. But I will tell you now that many enterprises are imposing transformation on their organizations right now. So if you look at the data clearly tells me that what is happening in the industry is Agile has been around since, I was just talking to Jonathan, and he was telling me Agile's been around since about 2003 or 2004. And I know Lee's here, and I'm going to embarrass him as well, and Lee knows that really well as well. And you look at that, and what we are seeing is that development is going at almost 70% Agile now. And I think that's Agile with a little a, not a big A, right? Just to upset the Scaled Agile framework people. But the reality of this is that we are not seeing that in operations. In ops, we are seeing you release monthly or faster. In fact, I can even go slower than that. We are seeing you deploy. Less than 31% of you are deploying at that rate. Now, most of you are here because you're in the good group. All right? Whether you're dev or ops, you are the good people. You're the people going at pace. It's the other 42 million people that aren't here that are not going fast. And that's the fundamental differentiation that we see in the market. But everybody, unlike other trends in IT, are forced to do business transformation. Because if you don't, you are not going to survive. Just look at the taxi industry and what Uber and Lyft and every other version of them are doing to them right now. They are destroying them. I caught a car here, Uber here, because Lyft said it was going to be an hour before I got someone. So, and that's a problem in and of itself, right? But the reality of it was that the Uber driver said, I used to be a taxi driver in San Francisco. I'm making twice as much with Uber and working half the time. So why wouldn't I be an Uber driver, right? And you look at that, and businesses go and look at that, and they're really not truly wanting to transition. Well, this is the year of DevOps because my data tells me that this year the balance has changed in operations. Finally, we've got Dev and Ops working together. And actually, my discussion topics are changing from what is DevOps to how do I bring security in? How do I get DevSecOps working? How do I get my compliance people engaged? And the Capital One session today was really awesome about talking about how to get audit engaged. By the way, if you've got audit stopping you, you know you've got somewhere. Think about that for a minute. If audit is stopping you, you have visibility, you have awareness, and you're going somewhere. So I'm pleased to tell you that the data we just ran, and we've correlated this 3 different ways, shows that 13% of you all claim you've implemented DevOps, whatever that is. And we can have another workshop later at the bar to work out what DevOps is. And I need a volunteer to lead that, so Paul, you win. But we can work that out. But 13% of you said you had, and 50% of organizations said they were implementing or expanding DevOps. Really interesting. And 27% said they want to do it in the next year. So that leaves 10% of you all who don't care about DevOps and don't want to do it. I want to know how quick that 10% are going out of business. Because I will share with you, if I go to a company and they tell me that's where they are, I'll pretty much predict that if they don't transition, they are not in business in a couple of years' time. They're gone. It's all over. And, analysts are allowed to make those claims because we're allowed to be proven wrong. No, we're not. We're supposed to be always perfect. But anyway. So I went and looked at this data in yet another way. And this comes out of all the inquiries I got in my first 90 days in the job. So this is when this heat map started, red was hot and and white was cold. Well, somebody in graphics got to it and changed it. So brown is hot and green is cold. I didn't change the color, somebody else changed it for me. And I can tell you right now that what we are seeing is that financial services, insurance, banking, and utilities, including telecoms, and that's including IT tech companies as well, by the way, are leading the DevOps transition. And we actually split it into 3 areas: culture and process, we split it into velocity, and then we split it into tools. And it's really interesting to watch. We had some great questions over the course of the last 2 days about where to start. Well, I can tell you where you're starting. I can see it in the data, because I can see it by the questions I get and where you are in a maturity stage. And it's really interesting that I will share with you that most financial services, and Barclays and Capital One excluded, started with tools. They go straight to tools. Really interesting. And I can tell you now that when you see the heat map that we're going to do, we're closing off the data on December 31, you'll see the heat map in the early part of the new year. You'll see this year that if I have a color called absolutely, totally white hot, insurance, banking, and finance are it. They are absolutely dominating my inquiry load. In fact, I'm working personally, and you all, many of you all, and the vendors upstairs are working with these industries right now to transition. And then after that, we've actually even seen some government interest this year. We've actually seen some people working for state and federal governments and healthcare, which is the other laggard. Sorry to my friends here from Blue Cross. But we've seen them start to transform as well. So we've really seen it across the board. And the question is, where are you starting? And I get this question a lot. So the question where we're starting, well, you all know. Websites, right? Easy spot to start. New applications, e-commerce, easy spot to start. What about IoT? IoT, Internet of Things projects are going straight to DevOps. They're not starting anywhere else. Really interesting correlation. I didn't realize this till I saw the data. And then the other interesting thing that's happening now is we're seeing a lot of organizations who are just doing their first stages of DevOps, their pilots, their prototypes. They are going and doing an internal app first. Large manufacturing organization in Europe, what they did to get DevOps and sell DevOps to their management is they wrote an internal safety application. And it's quite simple and easy, and it took them 3 sprints to deliver the first version. And they delivered to every employee a nice application on their smartphone that interacted really well. So you'd walk around the office and see something broken, you'd take a photo, and that photo would go straight to the Health and Human Safety desk, and it would immediately log that issue. And then after you see that issue, then somebody would triage it and manage it. Quite simple, right? Not complex, not difficult. But it's really interesting, as people got used to using it and saying it, they actually put the feedback loop straight into the program. So that feedback loop went back. So the backlog and ideation was built straight from the end user community. It was amazing. It absolutely transformed. So they then had lines of business come to them and say, we want to be the next. We want what you're delivering for this internal app for our customers. Kind of interesting, right? To see that transformation happened over 3 sprints. So they've now gone from one application and one product team to 10 product teams in 90 days. And these are all people who want to buy in. They want to be in. Now, there was not one talk about tools there, was there? I didn't talk about tools. I didn't talk about automation. I just talked about transforming the culture. Now they're going to go back, and by the way, every one of those 10 tool teams are using different tools. That's okay. What they're going to do now is go back, and as they get critical momentum, they're going to do some rationalization. They're going to do some standard defined tool sets. But they're not starting there, so they're not calling anybody's baby ugly, which is kind of an interesting correlation. So if you look at what's happening, this is a big problem I have. We call it DevOps. Now, somebody said to me this morning that dev is first in DevOps, so dev wins. All right, so for the rest of the day, it'll be ops dev. No, don't. And it's really interesting. The other thing is we see that dev is definitely going faster. We see this everywhere, right? But dev is going faster because most organizations, dev talks to the business. It's very few organizations where ops and the business are best friends. Now, I'd like that to change, and I've been talking about it for a long time, but maybe it will never change. But the notion of products teams does change it. Product teams, you have, and this is where I'm seeing another organization, a couple that are here. Product teams that are well led in a DevOps world are actually led by a business person. Large bank in Australasia, their DevOps teams are all led by the business. In fact, they are now moving their DevOps teams out of IT. Their DevOps teams now sit in the middle of the business. So their product teams are there with the business, working with the business every day. The business is coming to them, working with them, talking about them, helping them ideate, helping them drive backlog. And it's a really interesting transition that's happening. But the biggest complaint I hear when I talk to your senior leadership is 64% of businesses are totally dissatisfied with release velocity. It takes too long. We don't get what we want when we get it. And when we do, it doesn't work. I hear that over and over and over again. I get that, and my peers get that on a constant basis. And we even get that sometimes with DevOps implementations. I had one the other day that came to me and said, we release very, very quickly now. We release crap very, very quickly. Please don't anybody tweet that one. That one will get me in trouble. But the reality of it is that if you're releasing just faster without quality, you've wasted your time. Because quality is a partner of speed, and actually if you do it right, you're going to get it all together. So if you want to know what it looks like, this is what enterprises deploying looks like. This is monthly or faster, and this is an unbelievably great improvement on 3 years ago. This is fantastic. I'm excited about this stat because this tells you we are having an effect. DevOps is taking root, it's getting there, and we've got organizations actually deploying faster. And you'll be shocked to hear, maybe not shocked to hear after hearing Jonathan from Barclays today, Europe is deploying faster than North America. Isn't that interesting? In fact, my peers will tell you that maybe come from Europe or have global organizations. We see a lot of advancement in Europe. It's almost like they skipped a whole step. And, we actually see it in major enterprises, but we're not seeing a lot of this in very small to small businesses. So the other stat that excites me, and I shared this at lunch, 8% of you all are now releasing on a daily basis. That is a huge improvement on just 2 years ago. We're very, very few. You had to come here and sit in the opening keynotes 2 years ago to hear about the odd unicorn that was actually deploying faster. Or, you'd see a presentation from me talking about AWS deploying 720 times a day, right? But the reality is, by the way, not everybody needs to deploy quickly. And one of the things I'm hearing now actually is you guys are going too quick and the business can't keep up. Isn't that interesting? You're deploying too quickly for the business. In fact, that's an interesting inquiry which has just started in the last 90 days, is I'm getting the business calling me saying, how do we slow them down? Wouldn't you all love that problem? Wouldn't that be great when they come to you and say, please slow down, you're going too fast? Now, that's going to happen, but the real problem statement we have is what I call, and this is the kind of it's a good problem for us to have, is silos of automation. Now, silos of automation, we see this in organizations. I don't know about you, but I've been in IT a few years. I got the grey hairs to prove it. But the reality of it is that we got really good at automating within silos. You know, we're really good. Let's automate this process. Let's automate this little tiny bit. We'll get really good at it, right? Let's get to maturity level 4. Or if you're on a CMMI model, let's get to maturity level 5. So you have this little process that's at maturity level 5. Isn't that great? Well, maybe not, because what the data shows me is that we are implementing DevOps pipelines or tool chains, whatever you want to call it. You're implementing them in lots of disjointed fashions, in lots of disjointed pieces, and what you're doing is you have these manual handoffs all over the place. Now, the first one that we see is this handoff from CI to CD, and we see that clearly where you suddenly change tools. By the way, in the DevOps industry right now, I guess I'm allowed to say this, the big 4 I hear about from all of you are Git, Jenkins, Kubernetes, and Jira. I can say them with an 80% probability that you will say, yes, we use one or all of those. Isn't that interesting? By the way, Kubernetes is the buzzword of the year. First half of the year it was Docker. Second half of the year is Kubernetes. I don't know what next year is yet. I haven't made it up yet. But I will, don't worry. But the reality is we see this transformation happening in the market, right? We're buzzword compliant. Yeah, I do Kubernetes, yay! And by the way, Kubernetes is good. Don't get me wrong, I love Kubernetes. But the reality is what we're seeing is that we're missing this end-to-end tool chain. Now, many of you have been putting it together. We've seen lots of good sessions here about it. You can talk to many of the practitioners about how they're doing it, and let me encourage you to do that. You should really do that. But the reality is the ones that are successful have control of the pipeline. And control's a bad word in this room, I know that, but ultimately you've got to get your pipeline under management. Your pipeline process needs to be in whatever you call change management. And by change management, I don't mean idle change management. I mean locked in a repository, access control by source control, and you need to get to a point where no one touches a production server. If you have any servers that have a name, you failed. If it's Billy, Fred, Peter, Adrian, Jenny, Michelle, and by the way, I've seen these server names, you failed. You need to get rid of that. You need to get to a point where infrastructure is truly, I don't care, cattle, horses, whatever you want. It doesn't worry me. But the reality is they need to be different because this is what we see. We see that only 29% of organizations have complete end-to-end lifecycle automation. And I don't care if you do it with one tool or multiple tools. Sorry, tool vendors in the room. But the reality of it is you need to have it automated and instrumented. It needs to be under control because right now what I see clearly is you're all busy doing these silos of automation, getting excellence in one vertical, and you're really failing in others. And by the way, even though it's not in the slides, I can tell you right now, one of the areas many of you are shunning away from is testing and test automation. You need to get that right. You need to get it right soon. If you don't get it right, your quality will suffer. You know, when I get an inquiry that says we're releasing rapidly, we've got great velocity, and I hear that quality is not good, I'll say, how's your automated testing going? I've got a 99% probability so far that you will tell me that automated testing is not working, it's not in place, and you do partially. You know, it's like coding. Do you actually write test cases for success and failure with every feature you add? And add that to the test pool? Do you do, you know, code reviews, true code reviews, not just the flick and check code reviews. That's hard to say in the afternoon. But the reality of it is I hear that too. You get Peter, who you know really well. Peter, do the code review. Thank you. Yeah, it looks good. That'll do. Do you get these type of things? These are impediments. They happen, by the way. These are simple things. You can fix these easily. Do you know where all your open source is? Because believe it or not, you're using open source. It's so funny. The change in open source in this world is amazing. 10 years ago, I was pulling it out of everything. Now, it's the basis of everything. I love it. But you know, when you have a struts 2 vulnerability, can you identify it, resolve it, and roll out the fix in 2 hours? Some of you in this room did it in 2 minutes. Some of you didn't need to do it at all because you did a scan of the repository and knew that you didn't have it. And this is the type of data that you have when you actually bring it all under control because everything should be around model-based automation. It should be delivering things automatically and it should be transforming so that you can actually deliver to production and in any way you do it. Now, one of the things I want to put in this slide is you've got to apply this model not just to infrastructure, it's got to be applications, it's got to be the middleware, and the next thing I think we'll be talking about this year is how do you bring the database into this picture and the data. And some of you are already dealing with that, and well done. And you know, the other thing I'd love to talk about now, and we've got a panel on it later, is security. How do you do security as code? How do you do audit as code? Now, one of the things I'm pushing my ISACA friends with right now is we need to deliver audit guidance that can effectively be delivered as code. What are the compliance requirements for Sarbanes-Oxley, or how do we validate against the European Data Protection Act? May 24, going to be a great day in Europe, right, when that act comes into play. How do we actually codify those so that we can bring them into what we're doing in terms of stacks? So let me, in just my last few minutes, let me go back and actually talk to you about the really emerging trend that I want to talk to you about that's important at the moment. That is this notion of containers. Now, if I was to ask you last year how many of you were playing with containers, we would have had some hands up, right? This year, everybody is experimenting or playing with it or about to. Now, as I said, the first half of this year, we're all about Docker. The second half of the year, it's Kubernetes. But the reality of it is, what I can tell you from an inquiry perspective, we have seen huge uptake in I'll call it container adoption, but if I change that to Kubernetes adoption, it's even bigger. So what's happening here is people are not just writing 12-factor apps, and many of you here are living that right now. They're not just deploying microservices. What's happening now is we've seen this huge shift in just the last few months to what we call lift and shift of traditional applications into container images and running them on container environments so that you can actually transport those applications just about anywhere. Now, that has a good and a bad side. It means that applications are transportable. That's good. It also means that, you know, you've got a bigger stack in that container because if you haven't refactored the app, you're taking everything, right? All dependencies, the whole lot. Most of you run them on a hypervisor of some sort if you are doing this. And most of you have actually got things like security kind of worked out now. You've got secure platforms, secure operating systems, so you've kind of worked it out and you're doing good. But the reality is if you go to it, you've got to think about how you deploy quickly, because one of the things about containers and microservices and Kubernetes, it supports these new trends that are emerging in the market. I didn't actually see a session at all on what the term in the industry is called GitOps. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. GitOps is a theory right now, or a methodology using Kubernetes for the and the CNCF components, including things, you know, the other pieces they're doing like Graphite and things like that, to automatically deploy. So we're now calling it developer-driven automated release, or developer automated release automation, something like that. So this is a concept we're now seeing, and containers are empowering it. We see lots of platforms like PaaSes on the market right now, and PaaSes are cool, that actually automatically deploy. So what we are seeing, even in the DevOps space, is this huge increase in container or Kubernetes-based increase. And we're not only seeing increase, I can share with you, when we pull the data after January 1, we will see significant adoption in production of containers. We currently estimate that you know, of those talking about containers, about 20% are actually used in production. Now, that's not 20% of the market share, that's 20% people talking about it. And it's a really interesting trend because it changes your approach a little bit differently, because if you're doing real 12-factor apps, you're writing small pieces, you're writing it often, you're deploying it often, you're doing automated testing, you're testing and rolling out, and you need orchestration to control that. Kubernetes is very nice. If you're a coder, you can code to it very well. If you're not a coder, it requires a lot of interpretation and help. But the reality of it is, this is the way forward. And the other area that's coming, and some people are skipping containers in Kubernetes and going straight to serverless. We're getting an increased, whether you use Microsoft Functions or Lambda or OpenWhisk, we are seeing an increased level of increase on those right now. And those increased level of increase are people saying we want to go faster. And guess what? The pressure is going back on the ops side of DevOps again, because we can't have 4-day change windows. Or we can't have change windows of, you know, once a week at midnight. With containers, you can replace just a single component It's easily done. Rebuild the container. You can do blue-green deployments simply. You can do canary deployments, all that type of stuff. So the reality of what we're seeing in the industry is the world is fundamentally changing. What I tell you now will actually be different next year. So I want to leave you with one thing we're playing with, one thing we're toying with right now, and you can see I'm not using the infinity loop for DevOps. My thanks go to Blueprint, who gave me the right to use this. They never copyrighted or service marked it, so I stole it. I told them I did it. It's okay. No secrets there. They know I'm borrowing it. But if you look at this loop, it's a little bit different. And the other thing we're starting to see is we're starting to see the advanced organizations really go to what we call biz DevOps. And what do I mean by biz DevOps? Once again, like DevOps, there's no good definition of it. But what empowers biz DevOps is the ability for business, people sitting in the business, line of business, to actually drive code, write code by using configuration settings and maybe using APIs to build modules and build process flows and build new Salesforce apps or build new Oracle apps or build new low-code, no-code platform apps. Hit the go button. And that goes right through the automated testing process, right through the QA process, right through the staging process, and deployed directly to production. And you might think it's a dream, it'll never happen, the auditors will get in the way. For a lot of the work you all do, it's probably very valid. If they're using a pre-configured set of components, if they are using an approved configuration, an approved standard, and a process that is under control, and I hate to use that word control, but I can't think of a better one right now, applying governance like the session talked about this morning, why can't they? If audit have signed off on it as well, you're good to go. So we talked a lot about collaboration and working together with our partners. But the reality is this is where your future is. This is where things are going in the future, and this is another set of maturity. So one of the things I encourage you to do, understand where you are now, understand where you want to get to, map what that process looks like, start to work through that chain, but be really flexible, because remember, just because you set yourself a 3, 6, or 9 month roadmap, notice I didn't even say 12 months, I bet you before you get 90 days down the path, something will change. And that's the wonderful thing about this industry right now. We can tell you all sorts of goodness, and we can give you good guidance, and when you go to that DevOps day in your local city, you'll see that something has fundamentally changed that'll shift your perspective and have you wanting to do things a little bit differently. So that said, my time is done. Abigail is about to throw me off stage. Thank you for having me. Thank you.